Hey YouTube, Dosm Rider here with my Dosm's Rambles on Power Rangers Wild Force. I said this would be closer to Time Force, and I think that's true. I got through Wild Force pretty fast-ish, and I was a liar because I said I was going to go back and rewatch one of my previous videos to remember the format, and I didn't do that. I will probably do it sometime between now and the end of this series of Power Ranger Rambles. Maybe. But anyway, so Wild Force. I may have mentioned it in my Time Force video, and I definitely mentioned it on the podcast, but I enjoyed Wild Force a lot more than I thought I was going to. And that doesn't mean I thought I was going to not enjoy it or I hated Wild Force previously. I always liked Wild Force just fine. But for whatever reason, this time when I rewatched it, I enjoyed it quite a bit more than I thought I was going to. It's the first time I've rewatched it in its entirety since I watched Gao Ranger a couple years ago. So I think I mentioned that also in Time Force. So I'll be bringing that up a bit in the story. Which I guess I'll start with, and that what I think I liked most about Wild Force and was most impressed with that I didn't remember is that it moves at a pretty nice pace in terms of there's not a whole lot of filler. It's not lacking of any filler, but usually when there's filler, something happens. Like, for an example, in the second half of the series, which is what I remembered as my least favorite Wild Force episode, and it still is my least favorite storyline they did, which is the flute monster that makes them dance. It's just kind of one of those over-the-top, like, annoying things. But even in that episode, like, something happened that was important to the plot, which was, like, Kite hearing the song that Merrick and Princess Shayla sang, and it was, like, important to, like, hinting about him remembering Azimuth. Azimuth? He's Azimuth! He created the Omnitrix! No, Animus. But so, anyway, like, that's my point, is that even in that episode, which I hated the main plot, like, even if it was a filler, there was most often something happening. So I was just pretty impressed that I didn't remember it being that much, like, because usually we start out with the series, not usually, but I mean, the way it started was, like, we started out all introductory stuff, and then we got all the Wild Zords, and then before you knew it, it was Nanaku, and then Lunar Wolf stuff, and then we got, like, the Falcon Zord, and Animarium armor, which is one thing I want to talk about in a second, and then, Kite, and then basically the endgame. Oh yeah, not to mention somewhere there in the middle was the Master Org stuff. So it all moved at a really nice pace, and I'll say this, as a whole, it didn't feel rushed. But the only part that I do want to mention, in fact, I'll get this out of the way right now, my two problems with the series that I disliked, was the episode where the Falcon Zord was introduced was the same episode I believe the Summoner and the Animarium armor was introduced. Like, that was too much at one time. That should have been spread out. I would have rather seen... I mean, the Falcon Summoner and the Zord at the same time makes sense. So I guess me saying that makes no sense. But the Zord and the Animarium armor should have been a two-parter. It just felt like way too much. It felt like something modern PR would do. I don't remember it happening that quickly. But that was one of my only real problems. My only other problem that really was notable, sort of dislike, is Kite. I think the fact that there was story going on and there were some good elements to it was nice, but I just hate Kite. To be honest, I don't like kids in general, so when you make a kid into a role that's like sort of, I guess antagonist is the wrong word, but he's like an annoyance to the characters or an obstacle or an antagonist, it creates an extra layer of dislike. Like, if this had been any other character, like an adult or an alien or an animal that talked, everything about the storyline or his motivations would have annoyed me. But the fact that it's a kid and I'm not a fan of kids, like, made it worse. But I just hated that part of the storyline because I really like the Animus Megazord. I think it looks really cool. He has a really awesome voice when he's Animus, and then you have him represented by this little dirtbag kid. And I hated the concept of, even though he said it was a test, which always seems like a douche move and dumb excuse, but I hated the whole, oh, the Earth is polluted, so you guys don't deserve our help. Like, they're fighting monsters. They're trying to stop the city from being blown up and attacked by monsters. And I know the orgs thing was sort of pollution, but it wasn't emphasized as much. It just seemed so unrelated. That's like saying, oh, I'm sorry, Spider-Man, you have to quit because the economy is terrible, and what are you doing about that? Like, it just pissed me off. It was... I like the concept in a way of trying to put in a message about environmental stuff sometimes, but I hate when it's for kids. but I hate when it becomes too preachy, and it felt like one of those moments combined with dumb logic, and I disliked that. But everything else I was pretty happy with. Like, I really love the mythology of Wild Force. It's just, I don't want to say it intrigues me because it's not like there was mysteries, but I just find myself really easily engrossed in it. I like the concept of it. I love the concept of the Wild Zords. They're probably my favorite group of Zords. I like the bond you feel with them, like the uniqueness of them. Just the way they look in general, I think, is just really neat. And I really like the Zanaku storyline a lot. I like how unique it is for the fact that you essentially get the Sixth Ranger arc starting earlier than usual, especially back in those days, because he first appeared as a monster, which is like totally different than like Tommy or something, or an evil ranger, it's still kind of unique. I mean, we've had similar situations. You know, we had like Tyzon, but he was like cursed or transformed by what's his face, Moltor, and then you have like Ivan, who was just stuck inside of a suit basically. But the fact that we started with a monster who basically had control over Zords like a ranger and appeared so much earlier and was such a threat was just really cool. And I really liked Zanaku's presence, and I just liked everything about the whole storyline and the way it was done. And now, just speaking quickly to Gao Ranger, because I talked about how in Time Force that both this series and Time Force were very similar in a lot of ways, which is true, but as I said, I'm weird in that I usually have more respect for PR after I watch the Sentai, and that was the case here, in which Gao Ranger does have some very similar elements, but I felt like it lacked a heart, for me personally, that I felt from Wild Force. That it just felt kind of hollow in some areas, and some of the storyline blueprints are the same, but I just like the way we did things better, and I think Zanaku is a good example of that, because there was just something I really liked about Zanaku, and I just wasn't feeling the Loki storyline, even though it had many similar elements. So that's more or less what I wanted to say about Gao Ranger and Wild Force, is that there's a decent chunk, I'd say like 75-80%, that follows the same blueprints, but the way Wild Force goes about it at least felt different for me, where I didn't feel like, oh man, they're translating this too much. It just made it feel like a different tone. I think in tone, in a different way, it kind of reminded me of Mystic Force and Magi Ranger, where they had this different vibe to the way they went about their mythology, even though there were similar elements. But one big thing about Wild Force's story, similar to Time Force and Time Ranger, that we added in our own major arc, which was Master Org, who, you know, was an original villain because he actually used a costume from Die Ranger. And I really liked that story too. I liked that we had our own unique thing. It was a story about a search for a parent, and the guy didn't whine about it every 3 seconds. Tyler. But I thought it was good, and it was interesting too, because Master Org I think is actually a pretty interesting villain, because it was almost like a twist or a next step on some of the themes explored in Time Force of a human-esque villain, or a human-like villain, because Rancic was basically human in a way, you know what I mean, like the humanness, even though he's a mutant. I think you get what I'm talking about, probably don't. And like Frax was a human, but both of them had redemptive qualities. Like Rancic straight up redeemed himself in the team-up, and Frax near the end proved that he could still have hope in humans, but like Master Orc was like the next step of that, where he was a human, like, but he didn't redeem himself. He went completely over the edge, which was kind of dark for PR at the time, and now when you think about it, I mean, it wasn't like, oh, he's a robot now, or he's a mutant, so you can kind of get away with blowing him up or seeing him as a villain. Like, this guy was a straight up human. I mean, he did become an Orc, but the fact that he lost his heart, and there was never any hints at him really having a redemptive arc, he just totally lost his humanity by the end, which I thought was a good sort of next step in some of the themes they were exploring, like I said. And I don't know, I just thought it was very neat and kind of a disturbing villain, and something that really separated Wild Force from Gao Ranger as an element I liked from the series. Speaking of the team-up, just to briefly touch on it, it is a really fantastic team-up of Time Force and Wild Force. It was a good job of seeing the cast work together, and it was like a good, almost like Time Force Returns movie to sort of do an epilogue and finish off / continue Time Force's story, so that was good. Forever Red's kind of a hot mess. To be honest, I prefer Once a Ranger. There's just so many logic leaps and questions, and the most fascinating thing about it for me is thinking about some of the plans they had for it when it was supposed to be longer, and like the hexagon idea and stuff, but I honestly not a big fan on that. Big a fan. I don't know where that came from. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to touch on the story, other than I like it, and I like that we separated ourselves from it, like I was saying with Master Org. And I'll just touch on Master Org again. It's kind of, I not funny, but an interesting motivation too. That speaking of the motivations of human characters gone bad, like Rancic was that he was discriminated against, and Frax was that he was a kind person and was shown evilness for that kindness. But Rancic's, I just forgot his name. Master Org was like, it was like a straight up villain from like a procedural motivation of he was basically just in love with this girl and was mad he was rejected, which seems kind of basic, but it's just kind of interesting for PR and how far they took it. That was disorganized, so I put that here after talking about something else, but I wanted to mention it. Okay, on to characters. Okay, I would say as a whole, it was probably, like as an ensemble, one of the weaker elements because I felt individually they weren't as strong, like in terms of other seasons where I could say, like RPM is a great example, or SPD. RPM I think was the strongest character example for me. If I can honestly say I love every single one of the characters and can tell you reasons why they're various favorites in the colors of colored rangers, like favorite yellows, favorite greens, whatever. But, and like SPD where I can tell you why I like them personality-wise, where they're distinctive. Whereas as Wild Force, I felt they did have distinct personalities, but a lot of them I just feel blended in and were just sort of a character trait. But I think they worked as a cast, if that makes any sense. Like, it wasn't like SPD or Time Force where I can really feel the huge, like, friendship bond between them outside the show or inside the show, but I still felt their bond as a group. I thought they worked well as a group, but they just all kind of didn't stand out as much. And it was kind of like I liked the mythology and story enough that I wasn't too mad about that. I think Cole was pretty good. I think they did a good job of his character being the sort of wild guy who didn't know much about society, but it wasn't like an amazing change, but they did sort of play it down over time. He became a little bit more normal. He didn't remind us he's a caveman in dialogue every 3 seconds, or a wild bling or whatever. No, he's not north of the wall. But you know what I mean. And Taylor's probably my favorite of the core 5. I just really liked her as a stronger female ranger, and I liked her storyline about wanting to find Animaria and joining the Air Force too, and then, becoming the Yellow Ranger because she did find it. I just really liked her. And Alyssa was good too, but she didn't have a whole lot to work with. I do like how she bookended it with her story. And Max and Danny are kind of this sort of cheesy duo that just kind of work. They're not really my favorite, and I don't really love them or hate them, but I just kind of like them just fine as this sort of cheesy duo that can be funny at sometimes. Like, my favorite part is probably, I think it was in the team-up when, like, Taylor and Eric are talking, and they're just like, never give up, and they, like, chest bump, and Danny knocks Max over, and he's like, oh, Max, I'm so sorry. That just kind of sums up their characters for me. And Merrick is honestly probably my favorite overall. His acting is a little bit over the top, but I still really like his character arc as Zanaku and what he did afterwards as Merrick. It was kind of a generic loner role, but he's always kind of badass, and what I liked about him or element of him I similarly liked Eric, is that he didn't shun the team like Eric did, but I liked that he worked with the team, but he didn't need to be with them. Like, he didn't move into Animaria. He needed to be on his own because of his guilt at first, and then just because he was a loner. And I just like thinking differently from the way it had been structured before, so I like that element. Princess Shayla, I'll be honest, is my least favorite. She was definitely too over the top. Goody two shoes, Diddy Kong Princess. Disney Princess, for me. It's just almost like to an annoyed mad level how annoying it could be at sometimes. The moment I liked her most was when Toxica tried to kidnap her and she showed that she could fight, which is kind of like, hey, why didn't you do that before when you were in danger? But still, it was kind of a cool moment. But I wouldn't say I have like a seething hatred for her, but she definitely could have been toned down. Like, I get what they were going for, but there's a way they could have balanced it with making her seem like much more of a pure princess symbol, but without making it so over the top. Like, in general, acting in PR could be spotty, and there's definitely some overacting and embellishing in Wild Force, but the fact that she stood out that much amongst this season definitely was a sign of how over the top it was. I already talked about how I disliked Kite. Jindrax and Toxica were kind of cool because they're basically like a Bulk and Skull, but they were villains. They were they're more like Jesse and James of Team Rocket, but I kind of liked them. I mean, they didn't do a whole lot character development wise until the end, other than actually finding out Master Orb was fake. But I kind of liked that they ended up helping at the end, but they weren't necessarily wholly good because they even talked about some evil motivations slightly at the end. But I thought it was kind of a good twist on the fact that Master Orb was becoming evil. and he was a human and he lost his heart, and maybe these two have a heart. I don't know. I just kind of liked them. I like that they got away at the end. It's fun every now and then to think about what they're doing. Like, if they cared about, if people caring or writing right now cared about stuff like that, it would be funny to see them pop up at some point just in the background or something. Like the way Piggy showed up in Mystic Force. Just have Gingex and Toxica just show up. But yeah, I think that pretty much covers characters and basically almost everything I wanted to say. Like I said, I love the Zords, so that covers Zords. Oh, the last thing I wanted to highlight on was the music. I'll probably be talking about music a lot in the next, like, many videos, like Ninja Storm through, like, Jungle Fury, I think, because most people think about PR music and, like, they think the standout is Wasserman stuff, which, I mean, there's stuff from Wasserman I like, and I get why it's popular. My personal favorite is Go Fly and Win. But I personally prefer the Disney-era style. Yes, I know they use some stock music, but like Ninja Storm through Jungle Fury, I always remember, as I'll mention this, probably you'll get sick of hearing about this, I love that they used a soundtrack that fit the theme and vibe of the series. And I totally forgot that Wild Force was actually the first one to do that, because you had Wasserman stuff from original through Space, and then like Lost Galaxy through Time Force was like a bunch of tooting horns. It was just like the same. That was accurate. Wild Force had this great soundtrack. It wasn't like a huge amount of tracks, but the songs they used had this great. I can't figure out the word. Almost like jungly vibe is the best way I can describe it. But it sort of gave this mystical animal Animaria theme to it. Like Cole had this theme that would play basically when he would be thinking about stuff or trying to listen for hearts. The epic theme that played when the Zords were summoned. And then there was one that was basically that same song, but it was for Kongazord, which I completely forgot about, that had this funny music in it. Zenaku's theme, which I believe is basically Titanic. But still, I forgot that they started that, and I really enjoy that aspect. It really set a tone for this series, and of why I prefer that type of score for PR that really... It makes things feel more epic and gives it much more of a cohesive vibe than tooting horns or 90s rock music. So yeah, I really wanted to highlight that because I really enjoyed that. But honestly, that pretty much wraps it up. I really enjoyed myself with Wild Force this time. Certainly not perfect. There are some things that could have been better, but I really enjoyed it. In fact, if I had finished this rewatch before I filmed my top 5 PR seasons, probably would get an honorable mention spot because I liked it quite a bit, and I recommend, if you haven't in a while, go in and check it out again. It is a pretty damn good PR series. But anyway, that's about it. Next up is Ninja Storm. Not sure how quickly that will happen. Should be quicker than the gap between Lightspeed and Time Force, that's for sure. But yeah, thanks for watching. Until next time, make sure you have the Crazy Podcast at writersraterambles.com. And of course, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, Dosm Writer, signing out.